Nō mai, haere mai, welcome. I'm Bruce Munro, and with me is International Relations Specialist Professor Robert Patman, and this is Global Insight. This week marks the second anniversary of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. 2 years ago, many people thought that Russia would quickly overrun Ukraine. It didn't. Then the world thought that the Ukraine would steadily drive out Russia. It hasn't. What's going on? Welcome, Robert.
Morning, Bruce.
Much of the world has been cheering for Ukraine. Why hasn't that support meant victory?
When we say much of the world, I think we mean much of the liberal democratic world. Many countries in the global south, for example, South Africa, which is a democracy, strongly support Mr. Putin. And India has been ambivalent. China has been tacitly supporting Mr. Putin. So we've got to get this in perspective. The majority of countries are either ambivalent or leaning towards Russia. But nevertheless, a number of very wealthy and militarily capable countries are certainly supporting Ukraine, and rightly so, because I think the attitude of the global south is quite frankly quite baffling. Because this is an outright breach of the rules which we live by, namely territorial integrity and sovereignty, and this is an absolutely clear-cut case of outright aggression, and it's a land grab basically by Mr. Putin's regime. And I'd go along with your description about the Russians initially having the initiative and then the Ukrainians fighting back. We do know that the Ukrainians have recovered about 50% of the territory they lost, but about 20% of the territory that Russia initially gained still remains in its hands. And there are concerns that the initiative is switching to Russia. And most of these concerns relate to the fact that the major donor to Ukraine in its struggle to repel the consequences of this Russian invasion, which is America, its efforts to support Ukraine have been undermined by domestic politics in the United States. The so-called pro-Putin caucus within the Republican Party have been blocking funding.
Can I jump in there and ask,
Sure.
Are they pro-Putin or are they trying to get other concessions? What's really going on?
Oh, they don't say they're pro-Putin. They say that they just want to bring this ghastly war to an end. Mm-hmm. But their prescription for bringing it to an end is to cut off American military support, which would enable the Russians to consolidate their gains. They believe that this is not the best use of American taxpayers' money. That's their pitch, and that America should be concentrating on problems nearer to home, like the border security. And Mr. Biden thought he got round this with a complex deal in which America, the Biden administration, beefed up border security in return for a funding package both for Ukraine and Israel. But Mr. Trump indicated to those within Congress who looked to him for support that he didn't approve that deal, and it was pulled. So Mike Johnson, who's now gone on holiday as the Speaker of the House, tends to listen to Mr. Trump on these matters. So there's a great deal of polarization on this issue. We shouldn't get it out of perspective. The public opinion in the United States remains overwhelmingly in support of providing assistance to Ukraine, as do the majority of senators, and including those in the Republican Party. But domestic politics has definitely slowed and indeed affected the Ukrainians' ability to resist the Russian invasion. We've seen recently, for example, the Russians have captured Avdiivka, a settlement which had, before the war, about 30,000 people in it. It was a drawn-out conflict which cost the Russians possibly between 25,000 and 35,000 troops. It's of no great strategic value. But the Ukrainians recently abandoned it after a long drawn-out toe-to-toe battle with the Russians. And the reasons they did that was because they simply ran out of ammunition.
In the past week, Russia's charismatic opposition leader Alexei Navalny has died in suspicious circumstances in a Russian prison colony. Many people have blamed Russian President Vladimir Putin. What do you think will be the repercussions of Navalny's death?
I think they will be both domestic in Russia and also international. Domestically, the interesting thing is that after Navalny's death, his wife, Yulia Navalny, she's indicated that she's going to continue the struggle. And so, in a sense, you can kill individuals, but you can't always kill the ideas they represent. Also, Navalny had a well-run organisation. He was very conscious, by the way, when he made the choice, we should say for our viewers, that he was poisoned by the regime in 2020, and he was flown to Germany as a result. And he recovered, but then he made the courageous decision to return to Russia. He was questioned about that, and he said that he felt that he could fade into obscurity or be killed in Germany if he lived there, because he argued that if Mr. Putin wants to get you, he'll get you wherever you are. So he made the decision to go back to Russia, and he was almost immediately imprisoned. And then his prison sentence was lengthened when the conflict in Ukraine began. And now, of course, he's died just before elections are about to be held in Russia. Mr. Putin was really fearful of what Navalny represented in Russia. A fierce, charismatic, good speaker who was relentless on anti-corruption. He exposed some of the mind-blowing corruption that Mr. Putin, his kleptocracy, operates under. So, I think Mr. Putin felt, and of course he has a track record for this, when he's confronted with people in the media or in politics that he feels are a threat, he usually neutralises the threat in some shape or form. So what happened to Navalny was, in a sense, not that surprising. Navalny anticipated it, but what he did do, and he said this on video, that should he die, and he expected to die, I think, then there'll be an organisation in place and people dedicated to the cause. So, yeah, in a sense, domestically, it could actually make life much more difficult for Mr. Putin than he anticipated. Internationally, I think many European countries realise that if the United States can't come to the party in supporting Ukraine, and that will certainly be the case if Mr. Trump's elected in November, they have to pick up the slack. And already there are signs. The EU has just given the Ukrainians 50 billion euros in support. In addition, Denmark, in a remarkable gesture in the last 7 days, has made its entire military stockpile available to Ukraine. Germany's on the verge of making long-range missiles, the Taurus, available. And the United States, in response to the Navalny death, has said it will take what it called devastating consequences. And one of those consequences may well be to release weaponry which doesn't have to be approved by Congress, but could nevertheless be things like long-range missiles. So we'll just have to wait and see what happens. But I think the unintended consequence may be to stiffen European resolve. They know exactly what sort of regime Mr. Putin's operating, and they probably really have first-hand evidence that Mr. Putin doesn't compromise, and they would doubt his integrity and his word if they had any peace deal with him. And so, in a sense, yeah, it may be that there's going to be international blowback for Mr. Putin.
Thank you, Robert.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching. Catch us next time on Global Insight. E no hurá.